Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I first want to thank BC Nurses United for Social Justice for hosting this webinar today as we explore the history of the Palestinian struggle from the Nakba to the present day and delving into the impact of anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia. I'm honored to be here with you today. I'm also inspired by the amount of initiatives I have seen come out in the wake of October 7 by many organizations, but to focus the lens on BC Nurses United for Social Justice, I believe that healthcare professionals are deeply aware of the vital role they play, providing care, comfort, and hope for those in need, and their commitment to health and well-being transcends borders. I know that every nurse, every doctor, every healthcare worker here has been following closely what's been happening in Gaza to the healthcare workers and to the healthcare system there, and they've been affected by it and felt like they want to do something. So today we stand in solidarity with the healthcare workers in Gaza who face unimaginable challenges under incredibly difficult circumstances. Of course, the situation in Gaza is dire and it's progressing by the day. Many have been killed. Many healthcare workers have been killed. And when I say many, I mean about 493, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. And those are just the ones that they were able to count. And others have been imprisoned while they're on duty. Their ability to serve their communities was severely hindered, and we feel this deeply. This is not just a Gaza crisis, but healthcare workers everywhere who understand the sanctity of their mission to heal and care feel the impact of this. What's happening in Gaza transcends the borders of Gaza. When healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, and hospitals are targeted, it undermines the very foundation of humanitarian principles and threatens the global healthcare community. It is a stark reminder that your work as nurses and healthcare professionals is not just about medicine, but also about advocating for justice, equity, and human rights. Today, we will take a journey through the history and pain and struggle of the Palestinians, understanding the root of the ongoing plight and how systematic anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia continues to affect them. We will also discuss how these issues resonate with our own experiences, myself included, as a Palestinian who grew up in Canada and has children that grew up in Canada. I have felt Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism, I could say almost my entire life. But in the wake of October 7, I have felt it more than ever. But this is not to say that it was not there from before, unfortunately. So our work is cut out for us and we have so much to do, but we will continue this fight until we reach what we want, which is justice. There's no place for racism and certainly not anti-Palestinian racism, because Palestinians should have a voice and they should be heard and their struggle should be heard. So BC Nurses United for Social Justice, the term social justice in the name of the organization. Let's talk a little bit about what social justice really means. It's a term we hear a lot, but its true essence is deep and comprehensive. At its heart, social justice is about creating a fair and equitable society where everyone, no matter their background, religion, color, race, gender, has equal opportunities and rights. It's about addressing historical injustices and tackling contemporary inequalities that still exist today. John Rawls, a well-known philosopher, had a significant take on social justice in his work, A Theory of Justice. He introduced the idea of the veil of ignorance, which means determining what is just without knowing your own position in society. So this ensures fairness, since you wouldn't know if the person is rich or poor, if they're powerful or powerless. You would just treat them all equally. Similarly, Martin Luther King Jr., in his tireless fight for civil rights, he emphasized that social justice goes beyond the legal equality, just legal equality. He said, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. So King's take on social justice was holistic. He included economic equality, access to education, and elimination of systematic racism. but it's important to understand the difference between two very key concepts when we talk about social justice. Those concepts are equality and equity. Those principles are often used interchangeably, and they're mentioned together, but they have different implications and applications. So let's dive into these concepts and see how they help us shape a fairer world. Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so on the screen, as you can see in the picture, just take a moment and try to look at the picture and analyze what's there. As you can see in the picture, on the side of equality, all three people in the picture, regardless of their specific needs, were given the same size stool to stand on and to try to watch the football game. Whereas on the equity side, the stools were distributed based on each person's individual needs to help them watch the game. So in essence, equality in its simplest form refers to the idea of treating everyone the same, providing each individual with the same resources and opportunities. Equity, on the other hand, goes beyond equal treatment and to recognize and accommodate differences, ensuring that everyone has the necessary resources and opportunities to succeed. Now, how does this play out in the context of the Palestinian struggle? Of course, we don't have enough time for me to touch on that specifically because it requires extensive discussion to fully explore equality and equity in terms of the Palestinian struggle. However, I do encourage everyone here to delve deeper into this concept and use it as a framework in their social justice activism. The concept of equality, sorry, 1 second. The concept of equality and equity within the Palestinian struggle. So when we talk about equality, we mean providing Palestinians with the same rights, opportunities, and resources as others in the region. This obviously includes education, healthcare, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, political representation, just basic human rights that everyone deserves. But here's the thing, while equality is crucial, it does not fully address the historical and systematic issues the Palestinians have been facing for decades. And this is where equity comes in. Equity means going beyond just equal treatment. It acknowledges and addresses that the unique challenges that Palestinians have faced for decades, such as displacement, occupation, deprivation. These experiences have all created significant disparities in their living conditions, and economic opportunities and overall well-being. So to achieve true equity, we need to provide targeted support and interventions that specifically address these disparities. Understanding the difference between equality and equity is very important when we look at the history of the Palestinian struggle, because this struggle has been marked by profound injustices and systematic inequalities. So to really understand the scope of this struggle, we have to look back at its historical roots. And we will start with the Nakba. And when I say we start with the Nakba, I know that a lot of people feel that the struggle of the Palestinians did not start with the Nakba, and I absolutely understand that. The Nakba happened in 1948, yet there was so much that happened before the Nakba. However, I see that the Nakba has been a marker in the Palestinian history and the history of Palestinians and their struggle, where it was really what is after the Nakba and what happened during the Nakba and what happened after the Nakba. It is definitely a marker that shaped the lives of Palestinians for decades to come. So the Nakba is an Arabic word, and it translates to catastrophe in English. And it took place in 1948. And the Nakba continues to this day. The Nakba did not end. I would like to show a short bit of a documentary, 1948 Creation and Catastrophe. Of course, I won't show it in its entirety. However, I do encourage everyone here to go back, look it up, and watch it fully, because it's a very important documentary. It features interviews with survivors and scholars, and it offers an in-depth look at the geopolitical and human consequences of the Nakba. It will help us better understand the historical context and the ongoing impact of the Nakba on Palestinians. Just give me a thumbs up. Oh, the video is not working. Okay, just give me a second. I'll stop sharing and then I'll open it in the browser. Oh, no, because I'm not sharing. Yeah, okay. Sorry, just bear with me. Okay.
What was the name of the documentary again? So maybe folks can write it down.
Creation and Catastrophe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's not. It's not allowing me to share the web page. And for some reason, I tested it, but hiccups always have to happen last minute. Okay. So, okay, I won't be able to show the, can everyone see the screen? If someone just let me know. I won't be able to show the documentary, but here's the documentary. Everyone can maybe look it up later and just take a note of the name. It's called 1948 Creation and Catastrophe.
I've linked it in the chat to the YouTube.
Okay, great. Okay, so in the documentary, a very important statement about 1948 was made. The statement, as you've all might go back and watch it, just pay attention to the statement that was made in the documentary. And the statement basically said 1948 for Israelis was a year of creation. For Palestinians, it was a catastrophe. So let's break down this. Let's break this statement down, because understanding this dual narrative is key to grasping the complexities and the emotional weight of the conflict. So for Israelis, 1948 is celebrated as the year of the establishment of the State of Israel, where it was founded in May 14, 1948 by David Ben-Gurion. He declared the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel, known as the State of Israel. This moment was seen as a fulfillment of the historical and spiritual longing for a safe haven for Jews. On the other hand, for Palestinians, 1948 is remembered as the Nakba, again, which means in English catastrophe. This year marked the beginning of immense suffering, displacement, and loss. During 1948 Arab-Israeli war, there was around 700,000 Palestinians who were expelled or fled from their homes, villages. They were destroyed and their families were separated. This mass displacement created a refugee crisis that continues to this day. with millions of Palestinians living in diaspora or in refugee camps, both in the West Bank, in Gaza, and neighboring countries. The country that has most amount of refugees is Jordan. I think more than 7 million. Also, there was at least 16 massacres that happened before Israel declared its independence, resulting in at least 200,000 Palestinians being ethnically cleansed. So that's what the Nakba is for Palestinians. So it's very important to understand this, because when the Nakba is downplayed, and we will touch on that later, that is the biggest form of anti-Palestinian racism, because that is a very key event in the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian history. It's not, the Nakba is not just a historical event, but it's the core of the Palestinian identity and collective memory. It symbolizes loss of homeland, the long for return. A lot of Palestinians that were forced to leave have not had the right to return to this day. My father is one of them. And the ongoing struggle for the rights and recognition for Palestinians and the desire to return. That's what the Nakba symbolizes for Palestinians. And as I said earlier, many Palestinians, when you speak to them, they tell you that the Nakba did not end in 1948. It is still ongoing. It just marked a start of a prolonged and unresolved crisis. There's millions of Palestinians refugees, both within the occupied Palestinian territories and around the world. According to the United Nations UN UNRWA, the UN Relief and United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, there's about 5 million registered refugees, but there are other refugees that are not registered. And of course, this comes with poverty. This comes with limited access to essential services like education. A lot of them don't go to school just simply because they live in refugee camps. This comes with no employment. This comes with a lot of healthcare problems. And they're, of course, subjected to restrictive policies. They have no legal rights and they have no protection like other citizens. Of course, the right of return, which is enriched in the resolution, UN resolution 194, remains unfulfilled. And at this point, the prospect for a just resolution just seems increasingly distant. To add to the effects of the Nakba is the ongoing occupation of the West Bank and the blockade of Gaza. Of course, both further aggravates the crisis. Palestinians in these areas face daily hardships. They face restrictions on movement. They face military attacks. They face home demolitions, land confiscations, and of course, the never-ending expansion of Israeli settlements that just continues to encroach on Palestinian land. All of those undermine the viability of a Palestinian state. And the ongoing war on Gaza, today, I think we're in day 294, if I'm not mistaken. And I think we have now, as of the recording of this, we are in the 9th month, or the 9th month, I believe. It just serves as a stark and painful reminder that the Nakba of 1948 is not just a historical event, but it's an ongoing reality for Palestinians. Another critical example of the ongoing ramifications of the Nakba is the systematic anti-Palestinian racism and that affects Palestinians, both within the occupied territories and around the world. This is a direct consequence of the Nakba, and we will touch on that in a bit, reflecting how this historical trauma and dispossession experienced by Palestinians have translated into social, political, and economic marginalization. Let's look at what anti-Palestinian racism means. Sorry. So anti-Palestinian racism refers to the prejudice, discrimination, and hostility directed against Palestinians as an ethnic, national, or cultural group. It's rooted in colonialism, imperialism, and ethno-nationalist ideologies that seek to marginalize and oppress Palestinian people. It perpetuates injustices and inequality and denies Palestinians their fundamental rights to self-determination, dignity, and equality. Let's look at the historical background of anti-Palestinian racism. And as I said earlier, the Nakba is one of them. But first, let's look at the British mandate for Palestine. So after World War I, British took control of Palestine, and they facilitated Jewish immigration to the region in mass, and of course, ignored the rights and aspirations of the Palestinian population, which of course increased the tension in the area. Then there was the emergence of Zionism. This movement, which started in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, aimed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This colonial influence significantly contributed to the rise of anti-Palestinian racism. Next, we have the Nakba in 1948. When the State of Israel was created, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced. The Nakba laid the groundwork for the ongoing exclusion and marginalization of Palestinians. It created a refugee crisis that still exists today. After 1948, the situation did not improve for Palestinians who remained in Israel. They became a minority and faced discrimination. They have various laws restrict their land ownership, political participation, and access to resources. And of course, the military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip both subject Palestinians to a harsh military rule, severely limiting their movement, employment opportunities, and political activities. And in most recent times, since 2007, the Gaza Strip has been under a strict blockade by Israel. Of course, this blockade has led to severe humanitarian crisis, economic devastation, and repeated military conflicts. So the war that's going on right now, and I remember I've said that I was recording a podcast and I was asked about the war that was happening right now. And I said, let's just remember that this is probably the 9th war in less than the span of 10 years. This is not just the war now. There was a war in 2019, there was a war in 2021, there was a war in 2017, there was a war in 2014, there was another war in 2016. This is just an ongoing attempt to completely erase this city off the map. So when we look at the conflict today, it is very important to understand these historical roots and how they shape the present situation. So how does APR show up in our society today, or how does it look like in various aspects of life? So first, we have denial of Palestinian identity and history, which can take many forms. And then we have the stereotyping, demonization of Palestinians, of course, in the media, politics, and public discourse. We have violations of Palestinians' human rights, including displacement, occupation, and colonization. Exclusion and marginalization of Palestinians' voices and perspectives, and discussions about their own rights and future. So let's explore these. A little. Denial of Palestinian identity and history. I've only covered a little bit of this. Could take many presentations on its own, but I've only covered I touched on some examples. First and foremost is the erasure of the Palestinian presence on maps. So as you see here, this is a map that I got off the internet, and I have not seen a map, honestly, I have not seen a map ever that says Palestine anywhere. It's Israel. And even if you buy a map or you go to the library and look at a map, unless it's a very old map, you will not see Palestine anywhere. And of course, this is a form of anti-Palestinian racism, because you're denying Palestinians their identity and their history and where they come from and their homeland. We have historical reinterpretation. So key events like the Nakba is either downplayed or denied altogether. And that is a form of anti-Palestinian racism. The Nakba is, as I stated earlier, is a very important event in Palestinians' history. And when that and what happened to Palestinians in the Nakba is either not mentioned and or downplayed, that is anti-Palestinian racism. I have recently advocated that the Nakba be included in the curriculum, because our students here in Canada, my children that go to school here, they need to learn about the Nakba. And I've seen in a lot of protests, people holding posters saying, look up Nakba. And yes, everyone needs to look up Nakba and see what happened there. But when that is downplayed or denied, that is a form of anti-Palestinian racism. Cultural appropriation. So Palestinian culture symbols, even as far as the kufiya, the thobe, which is our traditional Palestinian dress, our cuisine is often appropriated without acknowledging the origin. And sometimes it's just presented either as Israeli or simply as just a broader Middle Eastern or Mediterranean. The erasure of the specific Palestinian identity in those things is very important, and we see that a lot. So if you see on the slide here, I have included what Uber Eats did in December of last year. This was 2 months into the war on Gaza. They labeled Palestinian restaurants in Toronto as Israeli. And of course, that sparked a massive backlash, where they came out and said it was a mischaracterization and it was unintentional, and a lot of activists called to boycott Uber Eats. But it's not unintentional, and it was not a mischaracterization. This happens all the time, and we need to pay attention to this. So this all is a form of denial of Palestinian identity, which is a form of anti-Palestinian racism. Now, this next example, this is a personal example. So here on the screen, you will see two Canadian passports, two pictures of a Canadian passport. These passports belong to my father, who was born in Tulkarem. Tulkarem is a city in Palestine. My father left when he was 8 years old, and he has not had the right of return till now. So when my dad, these are just the copies that I was able to retrieve. Some people, keep their old passports, and some people throw them out. So I was lucky that he kept some of those. This one, the one on the left, it was issued in 2006. And then the one on the right was issued in 2018. So the one on the right, you will see when my dad went to apply for the Canadian passport, of course, they ask you where you're born and what city, what country. And my dad wrote Tulkarem, Palestine. And then they called him and said, we can't write Palestine. That's not a country. So my dad said, I don't have solutions. That's where I was born. And the Canada Passport Office unilaterally decided that they're going to use Jordan, as you see here, J-O-R, Jordan as the country. Of course, there's no Tulkarem in Jordan, and Jordan is a different country than Palestine, but they decided to use Jordan. And this is a prime example of anti-Palestinian racism. Then in later passports, as you see on the right side, they decided, again unilaterally, that they're going to use West Bank. West Bank is not a country, but to them, that is all that they can offer Palestinians. They are not going to write Palestine on the passport. So this is an example that shows that anti-Palestinian racism is rooted in our everyday life. And unfortunately, it's in Canada more than we think. Next, we have the stereotyping and demonization of Palestinians in media, politics, and public discourse. Of course, the media portrays Palestinians as aggressors or terrorists, ignoring the context of occupation and dispossession, which perpetuates anti-Palestinian racism. In discussions and debates in the public discourse, Palestinians are often framed as harmful, with harmful stereotypes, depicted as obstacles to peace, or inherently opposed to coexistence with Israelis. Cultural representation. In films, TV shows, and literature, of course, those ones are the very important ones, and those are the ones that run deep in our society. I watched a show, I couldn't get myself to finish it. It was called Fawda. And that show is a prime example of how TV shows show Palestinians. They show them as either terrorists or victims of terrorists, nothing else. And it's so dehumanizing and so discriminatory. It makes you wonder, when will this ever end? In educational materials, of course, in textbooks, I mean, I have kids in school and I went to school here. There's no mention of Palestinians anywhere. They're just completely omitted altogether. There's no mention of Palestinian history, culture, contributions, nothing, which of course helps perpetuates more stereotypes about Palestinians. And then on the international stage, Palestinians are often portrayed in ways that undermine their grievances and rights. They're not given the chance to speak for themselves, and they are rarely afforded a fair representation. And instead, they have other countries speak on their behalf. How does APR manifest in Canada? Well, like I said earlier, it is more than we think. So although we don't have specific statistics since the October 7 attack, but we have seen so much employment repercussions. We have seen many people in Canada warned, suspended, investigated, fired by their employers due to the expression of their views on Palestine. There was an article by the Maple. It was highlighting just a sampling of the cases that included educators, physicians, pilots, journalists, politicians, bureaucrats, and restaurant staff that were let go of their jobs because of their views on Palestine. And at the end of my slide, I will include a QR code and a link to some of those media articles that I have put together that talk specifically about some of the things that I mentioned here. In Canada, we've seen physical and verbal assaults, people wearing kufiya, myself included. I have witnessed this. And I invite at the end of my presentation, where it's open to Q&A and some discussion, I invite people to share if they feel comfortable in sharing, if they have experienced any of this, because a lot of people are hesitant to share, but it is very important that we speak up and say that these things do actually happen. And it happened to me for wearing a kufiya. People were threatened, of course, with abusive, violent language. Even when people would be going around putting posters about what's happening in Gaza, posters about children, the dead children, or the amount, or what's going on, or what day of the war we're in, you would get verbal assaults. If you're displaying the Palestinian flag on your car, you would, you knew that you could have your car damaged, or someone beside you or behind you would honk at you or give you, the body language that is very aggressive and derogatory. We had Canadian Muslims targeted. The records were skyrocketing, which is Islamophobia, and that's always conflated with anti-Palestinian racism, but they're two different things, and I will touch on that in a bit. There was a widespread demonization of pro-Palestine demonstrations. I remember in Ontario, the premier there, Doug Ford, he referred to them as hate rallies. And those who participated in solidarity with Palestinians, of course, have faced calls that they might be charged for supporting terrorism, or they even went as far as saying, if you are not a Canadian, or if you're here on a student visa, you might be deported. They've been defamed in racist political cartoons, which claim they support killing Jews, and have been referred to as Tide Pod Taliban by radio personalities. I will include those in the QR code. In Calgary, we had a protester arrested for using the famous popular chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." This is a call for freedom, and it has nothing to do with wanting Jews dead or anything like that. But this simple call for freedom, which has been grossly reinterpreted by critics as a call for violence, and that person's charges were stayed. And of course, we have had a lot of violence in the States perpetrated on Palestinians. The two very well-known ones is when the 6-year-old boy was stabbed by a man 22 times, and his mom as well was assaulted. Of course, the little boy in Michigan, the little boy died. And when the 3 students, the Palestinian University students in Vermont, they were wearing kufiyas and they're speaking Arabic, they were shot. And I think one of them has sustained injuries to his spine and is now paralyzed. So, of course, as you know, we are very close with the States and what happens there, and that has impacted the atmosphere in Canada. We've also seen police violence in protests. I have personally witnessed this, and I have seen close friends that witnessed this. The violence was not something that they needed. It's not the protesters were always just peaceful protesters, but we've seen a lot of violence from police here in Canada against protesters, and this is all things that we, as we go through it, we need to remember and understand and take note of, because we can't have this happen in our society. And in the wake of October 7, I feel like a lot of things that we didn't think that were possible are now vividly possible. And the more education, the more conversations we have, the more webinars like this we have, the more we are vigilant and completely aware of our surroundings, and we can now understand and stand up to them. The broader impact of anti-Palestinian racism, of course, extends beyond Palestinians. Anti-Palestinian racism is not just to target Palestinians. It is to target the broader Arab and Muslim communities, the advocates for Palestinian rights, and it also has legal and institutional impacts. So Arabs and Muslim communities, they, no matter where they're from, often face stereotypes and discrimination because of their broader anti-Palestinian sentiments. They're also subjected to heightened security measures and profiling, which of course is justified by referencing the Middle Eastern conflicts, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Advocates for Palestinian rights, of course, individuals, organizations, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people here can agree with this. If you're an advocate for Palestinian rights, you do feel the anti-Palestinian racism sentiments. They either face political repression, legal action, surveillance, and other forms of intimidation, and it's all done to curb their activism. There's also social stigmatization. Advocates for Palestinian rights are socially stigmatized. They're labeled as either anti-Semitic or accused of supporting terrorism. And again, these accusations serve to delegitimize their advocacy and silence their voices. They also face defamation and slander. So there has been a trend since October 7, and again, I think a lot of people here can relate, that anyone that is a Palestinian ally or is advocating for the rights of the Palestinians has been hit with slander, such as being inherently anti-Semitic. So if you criticize Israel, you're framed as anti-Semitic. If you are applying standards of behavior on Israel, you're framed as anti-Semitic. If you are being anti-Zionist, you're framed as anti-Semitic. If you object Israel as a Jewish state only, you're framed as anti-Semitic. If you associate Israel with apartheid, you're framed as anti-Semitic. If you're supporting boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, BDS, you're framed as anti-Semitic. And if you associate Israel with colonialism or occupation, which this one is a very good one, you are framed as anti-Semitic. Anti-Palestinian racism has really affected more than just the Palestinians, and I think we see this present in our society today more than ever. Institutional impacts, there's restrictive legislation. There's anti-BDS laws. So the boycott, divestment, sanctions, there's a lot of countries that enacted laws targeting BDS, which BDS, in essence, it just seeks to apply economic pressure on Israel to change its policies towards Palestinians. But those laws, of course, they're restrictive legislations, and they have broader implications for freedom of speech and assembly. Universities and public institutions, many of them have adopted policies that restrict pro-Palestinian activities, banning student groups, canceling events, or even allowing to display the Palestinian symbols. I remember in the week of October 7, here in Vancouver, there were some groups that wanted to hold events. I wanted to hold an event at a big university here, and I got an email back saying that it will take 6 weeks to go through the application process, which is something unheard of. I mean, I spoke to students at that university, and they said it usually takes 2 to 3 days. But of course, my event was about Palestine. And when they replied to me and said it takes 6 weeks, of course, at that time, you wanted to do the events as soon as possible because you were trying to share as much awareness as possible. That, of course, was just systematic racism in a way to just restrict the Palestinian narrative on campus. Palestinians and their supporters are often accused of being terrorist threat or sympathizers of terrorists. And the funny one is being opposed to democratic values. Let's look at how APR intersects with Islamophobia. Now, anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia, they intersect in complex ways. They're both forms of discrimination. They often overlap and compound each other. And some people who identify both as Palestinians and Muslims, they get the racism of both. But not every Muslim is Palestinian, and not every Palestinian is Muslim. So it's very important to differentiate between anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia. Both anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia are rooted in my God, my tongue twisted. Orientalist stereotypes portraying Palestinians and Muslims as the other. And backwards and threatening. Palestinians are often conflated with Muslims, just like I explained, and their struggles are received as part of the broader Islamic threat rather than recognizing the specific political and national aspirations of Palestinians. Both groups face dehumanizing stereotypes, such as being violent, terrorist, or extremist. Palestinian experiences and narratives are often erased or marginalized, mirroring the erasure of Muslim experiences and contributions in Western societies. Both anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia are fueled by imperialist ideologies that seek to dominate and control Middle Eastern resources, lands, and populations. And efforts to show solidarity with Palestinians or Muslims are often met with accusations of terrorism, support of extremism, silencing voices, and perpetuating oppression. Intersectional oppression, Palestinians and Muslims face intersecting forms of oppression, including racism, colonialism, and religious discrimination, which compound their experiences of marginalization. Lastly, recommendations. So this is not an extensive list. This is just a short, very short list of recommendations to counter anti-Palestinian racism. But it's a good start. We need to implement comprehensive educational programs to raise awareness about the historical and contemporary realities of Palestinians and the broader Arab and Muslim communities. When we do that, we help people understand the difference between Arabs. Of course, Palestinians are Arabs, but the other Arabs that are not Palestinians, and Muslims and Palestinians, just like I said, Islamophobia, anti-Arab racism, and anti-Palestinian racism are three different things. We need to enhance legal protections against discrimination and hate crimes, ensuring accountability for perpetrators. We have here in Vancouver an Islamophobia hotline. So you can call the line and you can report any incidents where you feel that you have been subjected to Islamophobia. But we don't have anti-Palestinian racism hotline, and I think we need one. And we also need to advocate to have Canada's anti-racism strategy, CARS, adopt and provide a definition of APR and anti-Arab racism. Like it provides a definition of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, but it does not provide a definition for anti-Palestinian racism. And once we have that happen, it will in turn facilitate an adoption of anti-Palestinian racism by the Canadian federal government. So those are very important steps that we need to advocate for, because this will help people understand that anti-Palestinian racism, A, exists, and B, needs to be dealt with the same way any form of racism needs to be dealt with. We need to develop community programs that foster mutual respect and understanding by breaking down stereotypes through dialogue and interaction. So we've seen in the wake of October 7, we've seen a lot of organizations that are Jewish, like one of them, Independent Jewish Voices. And I personally try to have those people present in our events when we are advocating for the Palestinians and the Palestinian struggle, because we need to show that we have mutual respect of each other. We need to show that we have an understanding, we have a dialogue, and that one thing does not trump the other. So if you are advocating for Palestinians, that does not mean that you don't like Jews or you hate them or you are anti-Semitic or you are against them. So it's very important to continue dialogue. It's very important to have those interactions. It's very important to break down stereotypes. It's very important to continue to foster a healthy environment, to foster a safe environment where we can share our views without holding back and without being hit back with slander and stereotypes. We need to develop community programs, encourage fair and balanced media reporting, that includes diverse perspectives and accurately portrays the experiences of Palestinians and Muslims. Now, this one is a little hard because the media is controlled, and it's controlled by people that just don't want to show a fair representation of what's happening and a fair representation of the Palestinian struggle. But what's important here is that we pick on those, either if you see a video, if you see an article, if you see any thing that is showing an unfair representation to Palestinians, we need to make that seen, and we need to even go as far as writing to those media outlets to show them that this is not acceptable and we won't accept it. Of course, I've seen this a lot in the wake of October 7 of how media covered the war on Gaza. Just today, I received a post that was showing, I think it was the Globe and Mail, how they covered when Russia attacked, bombed the hospital in Ukraine, and how they covered when one of the hospitals was bombed in Gaza. I think on the side of Gaza, it was that Israel was trying to, of course, get to Hamas inside the hospital. And on the other side, it was that it was completely unacceptable and completely against international law and unheard of to target hospitals and kill healthcare workers, patients, and whatnot. So it's clear as day the unfair representation when it comes to the Palestinian struggle in the media, and we need to improve that. And lastly, we need to amplify the voices of Palestinians and Muslims advocates, providing them with platforms to influence policy, decision, and speak for themselves. In our work of advocacy, we need to do more of what everyone here is doing, and we need to continue. And I always say that what's more important than taking initiative is being consistent and being steadfast. Steadfastness is very important in the context of the Palestinian struggle, and we need to, even in the times where I personally have felt hopeless or helpless and felt that everything we're doing is not changing the reality, and that no one, myself included, has thought that we would be 9 months into a gruesome, unfair, unbalanced war, but yet we need to continue going. So I thank each and every one of you here for taking time of your night, probably after work, to be here, to allow me to shed light on maybe something that you didn't know from before, maybe some stuff you did know. But I think even if it's a little trickle in a bucket, it will go a long way on the long run. And I thank everyone that worked really hard to bring us together. And I am just honored and pleased to be here. And if you have any questions, please go ahead, but I am done talking.
Thank you so much, Arwa, for your amazing presentation. It was so informative, and you can just really feel your passion, and like everything about it was just phenomenal. So thank you so much for taking the time. We will briefly have Lindsay to speak to some of the work that our group has been doing as BC Nurses United for Social Justice, and then we will move into the Q&A. So you can, participants can go ahead and pop what they want into the Q&A, and then we will address it after we've gone through a brief presentation on the work that the group has been doing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Cassandra, and thank you, Arwa. I'm just going to speak briefly and share my screen about some of the work that we've done, and also a call to action for those of you who are here and are BCNU members. So some of our work this past year has been a couple of other webinar series besides the one that you're attending tonight. So in March, we had Dr. Gabor Mate come and speak to us about the violence in Gaza and some of the history and the context around the conflict. And this recording of our webinar is actually on our YouTube channel. So that's free to watch if you would like. And then in May, we had a webinar with Amy Lee Potter, who is from the Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. She's a nurse that's been working and recently, earlier this year, was in Gaza doing some humanitarian work. And so that, from a nursing perspective, was really a powerful presentation. Some of the other work we have done is we had a vigil in May at our annual convention, outside of that convention for our union. And this was a vigil that was supported by Independent Jewish Voices and Labor for Palestine. And at this vigil, we were able to really show some solidarity to Palestinian healthcare workers. We had asked the public to write notes of support. And so all of those little hearts that you see in the photo there are actually Post-it notes with notes written to the healthcare workers. And that's part of a larger project that is we've just contributed to from another organization. I will now pass it back to Samud, actually, who's going to start us off for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Lindsay. Arwa, I need you to turn your camera on. Please and thank you. Just because I'm not as gifted as you speaking, to a black screen. So they always give me the nicest job, which is thank you very much for speaking to us. We really, really appreciate it. And I want to reflect on some of what you've mentioned earlier, and I hope you guys will not be bored with me, but I want to read something. And this is something I prepared for convention because I was going to speak to one of our resolutions. So I'm going to tell you a story, and the story goes as follows. The year is 1948. The city is called Jenin. A young girl with long, neatly braided hair is walking through parched, unforgiving landscape. She's wearing a new white dress, embroidered with pink flowers, white ankle socks, and white patent leather shoe. She is the picture of childhood loveliness, but the year is 1948. And she and her parents and siblings are in flight. They are fleeing from their home. In her small, fragile hands, she carries a plastic bag. Inside that bag, some clothes, some pieces of bread, and a rag doll. In the pocket of her dress sits the key for her home. The home they are fleeing from, through the ruins of a city overrun by soldiers. Somewhere up ahead is a river, and beyond that is where they must go. When they arrive, they are in exile. The young girl is barefoot, soles blistered, her white dress coated in mud, her sweet face tear-stained and burned by the sun. That girl was my mom. Driven out of her home in Jenin in 1948, she never went back, just like your dad, Arwa. They could never go back, but my mom always carried that house key wherever she went. I wanted to read that because I am one of many, many that have heard these stories from their families. And we actually still have the key for their house. And if you guys get the chance to see those keys, they are quite big and they have a big handle. So it's something that we take with us until we, inshallah, go back to Palestine. Another thing I want to mention is because, Arwa, you had mentioned that if someone went through some discrimination or went through anti-Palestinian or racism, I'm one of those examples. And I bet everyone on this, either panelists or participants, either been through some sort of discrimination or they've witnessed it. I was accused that I'm gonna kill everyone because I'm Palestinian. I wasn't allowed to wear my kufi. My kids were called names. I was spat at in the car, and that was a little while ago. So we go through a lot. Having said that, and it's shameful to say it, that we're used to it, just because we've been living with it all the time does not make it okay. But with you guys, like with people like everyone here, and I don't want to say the names because I'm going to forget someone, and I don't want to do that. Without you guys, I don't think me or anyone else could stand alone. So I thank you so much. And for Arwa, we've made you something. I hope you like it. It's not completed yet. It's handmade, but I just need to do some finishing. This is an
Wow.
appreciation for everything you've done for us.
Oh, thank you so much. I will hold that dear. I'll put it in my office. I don't know if you can see that map over there.
I did.
And Palestine is everywhere I go. And thank you so much. I am honored and humbled to be amongst all of you. And just like you said, our work, us as Palestinians, we can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. And we have seen, as gruesome as this war has been, and as crazy emotional it's been, as much as I have been humbled and honored that people around us are human enough to stand and call for justice and to hear us and see us. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'm gonna start by one question that was asked by one of our panelists, who is a very gentle soul, and they are concerned about you, Arwa. How are you dealing with this? What do you do? How can we support you in terms of, spreading the word, support you as a person? Because I bet it's very difficult for you.
In the wake of October 7, I was like, I actually went through a depression, and I have never witnessed anything like that happen to me. I have two beautiful boys, and I wanted to be there for them, but I just, at times I couldn't. I would sit on the couch and watch the news all day. I would be on my social media, sharing as much as I can, because I wanted to raise awareness, because I wanted everyone to see this. But it was completely eating at my soul. And for at least few months, maybe until January of the new year, I was really dealing with a hard depression. I was crying all the time. I was emotional. And as much as I wanted to continue my activism and to continue my work, it was extremely hard. And I don't think I've ever felt those emotions in my entire life. But again, I do see good in every hardship. And just like I said, I pushed through with the help of everyone around me. I've got so much support. And I took it upon myself, and I said, I will continue no matter what, and I will raise my voice no matter what, no matter the backlash. I don't care who doesn't like it. I don't care who's not going to call me anymore. I don't care who's going to unfriend me. I am happy about those people, because I don't need those people around. So thank you for asking the question, and thank you for allowing me to express myself. But just having me here today is one form of how you have supported me, and to show my work, because I need everyone to understand that this is a very, very emotional battle for us. We're Palestinians. The example I shared about my father, it's an example that I share in my work, but this is to say that my dad, who is 68 today, for 60 years has not been allowed to go back to his homeland. This is very emotional for us. This runs deep in our souls, generation after generation. The trauma is just ongoing. So yeah, but we have to keep on moving. We can't stand still.
I missed one part. Part of the question was, what gives you hope?
The people, The people give me hope. The voices, the amount of amazing, absolutely amazing initiatives I have seen in the wake of October 7. Everything I've seen, people coming together of all backgrounds, all races, all religions, that give me hope. That it gives me hope on daily basis.
And now I'm gonna leave it to Montana. There you go.
Hi there. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. I just wanted to ask you, what and how do you respond when you're talking about these issues and somebody accuses you of being anti-Semitic?
Okay, so funny enough, I mean, everyone here remembers the remarks that Selena Robinson has made. And I've got a chance to speak to Selena, and Selena mentioned something along those lines where, you know, those protests, we feel scared as Jews, and, you know, you know, along the line of them being anti-Semitic. And I just respectfully said, I disagree. They're not anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism, and let me remind you that Arabs are Semite as well. So anti-Semitism has been now used in a very negative way, and it's been used wrong, basically. So everything when I said, if you criticize Israel, if you are anti-Zionist, you're labeled and slandered and defamed as anti-Semitic, is just simply not true. So if somebody wants to call me anti-Semitic for raising my voice and talking about the Palestinian struggle, I think the onus is on them to get educated and to understand that that's not what anti-Semitism is. And I am not opposed to Jews, and I don't hate Jews, and this has nothing to do with the Jews and their religion or them existing. It just has to do with the Palestinian struggle and the ethnic cleansing that's been happening to Palestinians for more than 76 years. So in essence, to wrap up and to answer your question, I basically send them off on a journey to do their own homework, where I stand and say, I don't think that's anti-Semitism or has anything to do with anti-Semitism.
Thank you. That's a very, very well stated response for sure. One other question that's come up is, in the age of so much propaganda and misinformation, what sources do you turn to besides your own personal contacts to get reliable info on what's going on in Palestine?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I have to say it is hard. It is hard to choose those reliable sources, but I have people that live in Gaza. Maybe I'm just you know, fortunate that I'm Palestinian and I have those connections. I have people that live there. I have people that went there, and I usually, most of the time, try to get sources from those people. I've also, in the wake of October 7, I have followed people that were living there, and they were you know, showcasing what's happening live. So it's not CNN or Fox News or any of those media outlets, which I personally don't follow or listen to or take my information from. And I know that a lot of people have you know, some negative connotations with Al Jazeera as well. But what I try to do is I try to follow the people that live in Gaza and live in Palestine, because I also have people that live in Palestine. And whenever I see something in the news, let's say it's Al Jazeera, and I say, you know, somebody was you know, imprisoned or anything like that, I try to pick up the phone and say, did this really happen? Can you send me, you know, any videos or anything that you have on that? So that I try to do the best I can that way.
Fair. Thank you so much. I will hand it back to Samud to talk about a GoFundMe.
Thank you again, Arwa. And I'm so curious to know what people think about Al Jazeera, because I always watch on Al Jazeera. Well, I guess we're going to have this conversation when I drop the gift to you. Thank you. While I have you guys with us, we would like to talk to you about Majid. Majid is one of our colleagues. He is now in Gaza. I hope you can see him on the screen. Majid is a nurse, and he was granted a scholarship to come to UBC. Unfortunately, the genocide in Gaza started, so he was not able to do anything, especially that, you know, they can't use their money. They don't have any money. Their house is all demolished. So we have this GoFundMe, and we hope that you guys, if you are able to contribute, that would be very, very appreciated. If you don't, it's completely fine. If you can share the link, Francis already put it in the chat. We appreciate if you spread the word. Majid has a video on our YouTube channel. You can also hear from him. He was speaking to us from in front of his tent with his 2 kids. He has 3 of them, in fact. The other day I was talking to him, and he told me that he managed to flee dying within like 2 minutes. Like he was 2 minutes away from dying because he was volunteering in the hospital, the last hospital that was bombed. So we're really hoping that we can support him by, you know, donating to GoFundMe to bring him over, hopefully. Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate every one of you. Thank you. And I think Bridget, now we're closing. Did I leave you guys hanging? I can start singing if you want. Bridget? Okay, so I guess, Lindsay, you want to go for it? Or you
Sure,
want
I can
me?
do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. A very, very special thank you to Arwa for taking the time and energy to share with us this valuable information and experiences and all kinds of resources as well. So thank you about the anti-Palestinian or Islamophobic hotline. That's a great resource. And so Francis has put in a few links in the chat, and hopefully you can connect to our social media. We also want to thank Audrey Siegel as well for opening our webinar today. And we hope that all of you stay cool and stay safe. Have a great night.